All right, now we're here. Hi everyone, my name is Doug Kirchner. It's a little different than what Chris explained. When I decided to do this, I decided to go through my whole testimony, through how I got from birth to where I'm at now. It's not going to take 3-4 hours. It's only going to take maybe about 2. But so basically, growing up, my life was crazy. First 8 years of my life had nothing but drugs, mafia dons, Colombians living in my bedroom. And it's not something that, my story, if you heard it on the outside, it's more like Hollywood wrote it for me. I seemed to thought that I had a good life. I didn't really know any different except for what my friends had. But my life on the outside, we had a nice house, we had cars, everything that we ever wanted, except pretty much my dad was silent about everything. He cared more about himself and more about what he can gain than his children. So when I say my life was like a Miami Vice episode or a movie, Joe the Boss Masseria, my actual great uncle, he was head of the 5 families, and my whole side of my mom's family was mafia and drug dealers, gangsters. My uncle, who lived with us at the time of me being between the ages of, I think, 4 and 6, was he was one of Pablo Escobar's right-hand men from, he used to live in Miami, and then he came up here because it was easier to run a drug cartel up here, and going from place to place through New York, Miami, and Chicago. He pretty much dealt the whole Midwest and the whole East Coast. But I guess it started basically when I was about 6 years old. I pretty much became saved before my parents. And, basically this is one of my favorite sayings of all time. All roads lead to the judgment seat of Christ. I knew that at an age when most kids don't even care about Christ. I was doing Bible readings and writing, doing pictures. When I was like 3-4 years old, I wanted to be a priest, which never made sense because my parents weren't really godly people. We did go to Catholic school, but they weren't really godly people. So one day, my mom and I were at the street fair in Cleveland, where we lived. It's called the East 185th Street Fair, and we were just walking around one night, and we heard these guys singing, and they were an a cappella group. And we sat there and we watched them. We didn't even look where they were standing in front of, but they were on the stage in front of this building. And these guys were like, to me, they're like larger than life. But they're a group called A Cappella Fellas. Now you might remember them from Christian Center. Yes. So we're standing there, and I just felt, I was little, but I felt a push somewhere deep inside me that said, I'm listening to the lyrics, and I just don't realize that God's calling me. It was actually, I believe, the leading of the Holy Spirit. Well, this one gentleman there, his name is Mike Carswell, who led me to Christ. He came down and he said, I'm watching you. You're singing the songs, but what are you doing? And I said, I don't know, I'm just following you guys. And so he goes, well, don't follow me. He said, let's talk. And my mother, who, if you ever knew my mom, she's like very open. She let me talk to this humongous guy who had a deep voice like this. And so he was talking to me, and he led me to Christ. That was my first experience. So basically, after all of this started, my parents got divorced, or almost got divorced. They were separated. My dad left my mom for another woman, and basically tore our family apart. I was in counseling. My life was just basically ruined. But I don't know what it was ruined from, because I was getting beaten. I was, abused physically, mentally, spiritually, and verbally by my dad. So when my parents separated, my dad didn't see us much, but one weekend he was going to take us to a place called Cedar Point, which is one of the biggest amusement parks around Ohio, and I guess the Midwest. And on our way there, I forget what you call it, but it's not the tie rod, but something cracked, and our two front wheels just went up like that, and we almost died. We were able to get over to the side of the road, and we were parked in front of this restaurant, and it's kind of funny that it was about 2 blocks from Beulah Beach. So every time I go there, I'm reminded constantly that this is where our lives would take a different change. So my dad called my grandparents, my uncles, everybody he could. No one answered. The only person that answered was my mom. Mind you, they'd been separated for about 2 months at that point. And so to back up, the night before we went to Cedar Point, we were going to Cedar Point, I was sleeping in the same room as my dad, which is my grandparents' room, because they were in Virginia. And I heard him talking to somebody, and there was no one there. And he was like, I want my family. And I audibly heard another voice. And I just asked him about it maybe a year ago or two, and he goes, you're right, that did happen. And so I'm like, I wasn't crazy. We were talking to God. And he was pleading with God to save him so he can fix his family. And when that happened, he basically was like kind of a changed man the next day. He wasn't yelling at us, he wasn't screaming at us, he wasn't hitting us. He was just like, hey, let's go to Cedar Point, let's go. We're on our way, and then all of a sudden, the van goes. My sister and I were upset. We're like, we want to go hang out and go on rides and have some fun. Well, that night when my mom came to pick us up, she wouldn't talk to my dad, but my dad talked to her. And he said he was sorry and all this other stuff that I can't remember. But I do know that I remember him apologizing. That night, they dropped us off at my aunt's house. They went somewhere, and we don't know where they went until we got older, and we find out that they met with a pastor where my mom had a daycare at the church, which was a Euclid 4-store church. And they met with him, and they got saved. And we were like, we didn't know what that meant. I mean, I kind of knew because I got saved, but I really, at that age, who knows, what that really means. So we move on to my parents getting saved, but there was a trend with my parents that I never really understood until I got older. They kept on searching. My dad was a drug addict. My dad was an alcoholic. He always wanted that next high. It didn't matter where it came from. If he liked cars, he would want, he wouldn't be happy with a Corvette. He would need a Ferrari. If he didn't have the Ferrari, he would need a Lamborghini. So it was like that. And so our whole church experience was like that. And we went to Foursquare for about 2 years, maybe 3. And then my dad was a deacon. Some things happened where they found that the pastor was embezzling money. And so we moved to Calvary Assembly of God in Willoughby Hills. And that place became my refuge. That's where I started growing my roots, becoming, I would say, who I am in Christ now. I joined Royal Rangers, which is, if you don't know what Royal Rangers is, it's the Christian equivalent to the Boy Scouts, but it's really deeper. I mean, you go camping, you fellowship, you dress like frontiersmen, and but the difference is you're praying and you're doing walks with God that you never thought you would. And I never understood it then until I got to be about 20 years old, and I realized when they put you out in the wilderness for 3 days with just a match, a tent, and a couple little snacks, they're teaching you how to be reliant on God, relying on yourself. And it was a very humbling experience. But, so my parents got saved, we're saved, we're going to church, and then my parents decide Calvary's not good enough. So then my parents started to get into what we now know as the prosperity movement, the name it and claim it movement, basically the charismatic run of the church. And basically, I wouldn't have it. I said, you're going to a church now that they left our church. They started going to a church that was in an old barn in the middle of nowhere, and they believed in it was. They taught it was deliverance and spiritual warfare, but it was more about control of the people's families than those in that church. And knowing now what I know about spiritual warfare and deliverance, this was not that. It was a cult, and they tried to take my sister. And I basically said, I'm not going to go. So every Sunday, every Wednesday, every Friday, I would get beat because I wouldn't go. I refused to go. But it wasn't like I was not reading. It wasn't like I wasn't going to church. I would walk or skateboard up to the Assembly of God church near my house in Parma, and it was not close. It was about 10 miles. So I would skateboard, walk, do whatever I had to get there, beg friends to pick me up, because I knew that that's what it wasn't for me. So during that time, I was going to a school where I met Mr. Chris Bailey. You all know Chris. We've known each other since about, I think, 3rd grade. I don't know. I was probably about 15 in 3rd grade, so as Chris puts it, that I showed up to school with a mustache already, and I had a long hair, and he was like, that guy, is he your teacher? I don't know. But, so we were going there. My sister and I and my cousins were all going there, and then my sister graduated. My cousins started to go to different schools closer to their house because they lived about an hour away. And so I was by myself, except for my friends. Close friends were Chris and Michael Matthews and Charles Branch. We all hung out. And one day, I was a little bit of a mouthy kid, and our teacher was teaching that Darwinism, and it was the way to go, not intelligent design, not creationism, And so I openly said, I just said, if there's a monkey in here, it would be you. And, I never worried about being in somebody's face, but my parents were shocked to find out that I got kicked out of the school. And so I laugh about it because...
We're telling the truth.
That's what I said. I'll fast forward, about 25, 30 years later, I'm walking into Home Depot. Who would it be? That teacher. She was the cashier at Home Depot. Hi. I was having PTSD moments. I'm like, you pay. I can't get near her. But I'm like, God, your sense of humor is uncanny. So when I got kicked out of school, it ended up being my dad started homeschooling me, which me in school, if you knew, I failed first, second, third, fourth, and ninth grade before they figured out I had problems like dyslexia. So, I mean, I guess it was the 80s. You know, they didn't know what they were doing, but they never figured it out with me. I mean, me and Chris were in the special bus. You know, they put us outside of the school in this bus. We're like, hey, we must be special kids. But that's where God really took my life to a different level, because I started having my own opinion, my own thought. I wasn't going to listen to people that I knew were wrong because I studied the scriptures. And I was immersed in the Bible, and I was doing Bible studies every day. I was getting together with my friends and we were doing Bible studies. I mean, all day long, that's all we did. And so out of getting kicked out of Christian school, my dad teaching me, and the curriculum, let me say, I don't know if any of you know who Bob Jones University is. Well, as I put it in here, the Bob Jones University homeschool kit for the ultra insane, religiously based crazy people. I said, the same for me, man. This ain't my bag. So I started just chilling out at home, and I got bored. And I always wanted to do music stuff. And I heard that Michael W. Smith was coming into concert with this group, DC Talk. So Doug, in his infinite wisdom, calls DC Talk's record company and asks if I could do an interview with them. Mind you, I think I was about 11, 12. And yeah, they said, sure. I told them I was working for this Christian music magazine that was in Ohio. It was basically Northeast Ohio magazine called the Wedge Music Magazine. I told them I was a writer for them. They believed me, and so I got passes. And so I'm like, well, I got passes, now how am I going to get there? So I called up a DJ that did a Christian rock show every Saturday night, and I said, hey, John, I got passes to DC Talk and Michael W. Smith, and I'm doing an interview with him. He goes, oh, really? That's great. I'm like, could you take me? And he goes, oh, yeah, sure. Like, again, where's my parents? This guy's like 35 years old. And so a week later, after I got permission from the record company, I get a call from the magazine. And they're like, yeah, so you write for us? And I'm like, well, maybe. Yes, no. And so they actually said, we think you're cool. If you want to write the article, it has to be this many words, this length, and you're going to get the front cover. And I said, okay. I didn't know what that meant. I'm just going because I wanted to go to a concert. And so I ended up actually writing for them at age 12 for about 3 years. And I did interviews and record reviews, and I couldn't find the DC Talk one, but that's one that I did with the Christian rock band Guardian. And during that time, I met who are now some of my best friends in the whole world, and we started bands. We started playing the local church circuit. great for punk rock. It did not work out well. Only because I would dress up in a trench coat, a diaper, and a big bow tie, and sing about David dancing naked in front of Israel. We were pulled several times off of the stage. Thank God I couldn't find any of those pictures. That's the closest thing that I could come to one of the shows that I was in.
Which one are you?
This bald-headed guy, right there.
Okay.
So I became what would be known as the black sheep, the misfit of the family. So I found this the other day, and I'm like, wait, that's perfect. That fits me to a T. So at age 13, I'm battling with my parents. I'm trying to find who I am in Christ. And I'm like, let's do concerts. I got the interview. The bands I want to see aren't coming here. So I ended up calling a band by the name of Bride. I don't know if any of you know who they are, but they were the Christian equivalent to the band Guns N' Roses. And I said, hey, you guys want to come play a show? I got a venue, which I didn't have yet. And they said, sure. So we booked them on, it was Sunday, October 31st, 1989. And we booked it at this club called Franklin Station, which had a Christian dance night. And so they allowed us to use one of the nights to do this show. And my parents still went around. I'm like, hey guys, I'm doing this show. I'm going to Kent, which was about an hour and a half away from where I actually lived. All because I wanted to bring this band in. Band shows up, they see me, they're like, yeah, we're not unloading, we're going back to Kentucky. And I said, okay, I have your money. And they're like, all right, we're loading in right now. And I'm like, cool. So that night, what started out to be something fun started to be a ministry, because we had about 400 people on a Sunday night on Halloween, and I would say about 10%, 15% were not saved. And about, I think, 10, maybe 15 people became Christians that night and started walking with God, who I still know today. And when I think about it, it's nuts. If my kid, because I have a 16-year-old, if my 16-year-old's like, hey Dad, I want to put on a concert, and, I'm going to bring in this heavy metal band, and, it's at a bar on Penn State campus, I'd be like, no, go back to your room and play Forza or Call of Duty, and I'd be on my way. This is one of my favorite things. If any of you are a 90s kid, you know who Doug Funny was. But I didn't choose the Doug life. The Doug life chose me. I'll change that to God chose me. And through all the adversity of my childhood, it made me prepare for something that I didn't even understand yet. I didn't know. And when I look at it, it wasn't until I was 35, 36 years old that I realized that all of that stuff brought me to this point. So, I think about it. I was basically living at my parents' house, but I was an orphan. I had no one except for my mom when she made me spaghetti. That was what So, when your kid's meeting people like Michael W. Smith, having bad hairdo like that, putting on festivals, you tend to wonder, what is this kid doing? Why is he doing this? And I spent the better part of the late 80s, I say that like it's like I'm old, late 80s to early 90s, working as a road manager for some of the biggest Christian rock bands and playing in bands and just traveling the world at that point at 15, 16 years old. Having dropped out I dropped out in the 9th grade, and I don't say that people should drop out in the 9th grade. That's not my testimony. But,
that's what Doug Funny would do.
He would call Patty mayonnaise. Yeah. I didn't have her then. So, on a side note, I would end up meeting longtime friends, Chris and Tom Dunn. I met Tom Dunn in 1991. It's kind of funny because he was a scrawny, long-haired guy. Well, now he's got that dad bod and long hair. He looks kind of the same, just a little bit bigger. But we ended up meeting at a show that I did, another show that I did with Bride. This time my dad was part of it. My dad helped me build the stage. My dad helped me rent the sound and lighting equipment that we needed. And he got scared for me. This is the first time I ever saw my dad afraid for me. And I was getting death threats from Satanists. And that's how I met Tom Dunn, because he had heard that they were going to show up, and he helped bring Christian bikers to guard me. They just didn't know that I was this little kid. And to me, it's amazing that God would choose just a kid from East Cleveland to try to just better some people's lives, while all the time he was bettering my life. And I didn't even realize it. I just was doing what I was doing just because I was doing it.
When are you going to get to the angry letter?
I'll get there. The angry letter's coming. So, throughout the 90s into the 2000s, I toured, I recorded, and put on more shows. That ugly guy with sideburns is me.
What?
Being yelled at by some guy telling me to be quiet. I don't know what he's really doing. But in 1996, I would meet a girl, and we would, quote, fall in love. And we were kids. And this would be me at that age. Again, the hairdos, I don't understand it. The frosted tips. You know, I might have thought I was in Limp Bizkit or something, trying to be cool. But in 1998, it was 98, we were at Cornerstone. My ex-wife now, which you'll find out later, my ex-wife had cancer and was told never be able to have children, so it was never even a forethought. Well, Cornerstone 1998, we're in Galesburg, Illinois at a steak and shake at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and we have a bunch of our friends that came with us to Cornerstone, and we were sitting there with a couple bands, Goaty Hook and POD, and we were just chilling, and Kirchner getting from Goaty Hook, he goes, dude, your wife was talking about she was not feeling well and she was throwing up, and I know a little bit about this. And I said, you're a doctor? You play bass and I'm playing band. And he goes, I bought her a pregnancy test. And I said, she can't have a kid. She had cancer. They said, never, ever. Well, 9 months later, this little thing would enter her life. And she would change my life forever. But But on the side note, I would meet the year before at Cornerstone this gentleman who became a major player in my life and one of my best friends. And was it?
Before the black.
Yeah, it was before the Black Arm. That's why I was asking. We were young. We were stupid. We did a lot of things that made sense to us at the time, but the older we are, the more we look back and say, should never have done that. Who goes to play a concert and get paid $100, 20 hours away in Spokane, Washington from Cleveland? You know, we're like, but during this time, you know, building friendships, building a ministry, touring, and, you know, there's Tom Dunn, there's Dirt. At this time, my ex-wife now, I would find out, was cheating on me with one of my best friends. And that 2 weeks prior, had an abortion with our child. That he and I were out on tour, and I came home to find out that she had a miscarriage because she fell, and it was a complete lie. And if you know me, you know I love kids. Until they get able to walk and talk back to you. I guess I'm starting to sound like my dad. During the time of touring and trying to be cool and trying to be rock stars or record label owners and, you know, superhero humans that can live off of no sleep and Red Bull and Waffle House, which I'm not knocking Waffle House, that's still a great place to this day. I would find my family in turmoil. I did.
Sorry.
I did exactly what my dad did. That's a hard pill to swallow because I said I'd never be like him. So, sorry. Emotional. I don't like being emotional. I used to watch Lifetime movies all the time. True story. So I would get divorced. It was me and my daughter. Most important thing in the world to me. Until I would meet this girl. She said she wasn't going to come this weekend. She's hiding. Wait. Just joking. So, we met under the craziest of meeting people. But during that time, before my divorce, I prayed for God to heal my marriage, save my marriage. I love my wife. I love our family. And I would meet her about 2 weeks before my divorce became final. And I was running a concert club in Cleveland, Ohio called The Blind Women. And I was doing a Sunday matinee show, which matinee show means it's pretty much 21 and under, at like 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I don't remember what time it was, but I was bringing this band Alistair in, and her and her friend showed up, and I'm like, we were just talking about this, and she says I was creepy because I was watching her on the monitor. And I said, but the reason we were watching you on the monitor is because you're like tall, you're older than 85% of the crowd coming today. So we were like, who are you and why are you here? But dang, she's really cute. She's really cute. And me being the chicken that I am, we let them in, her and her friend in, and I would send my intern to find out who she was, to do intel for me. I'm like, you're my intern, you're here for school project, so therefore, I may not be paying you, but you're still my intern. Give me that intel. So I would find out that she's this girl from Youngstown who's going to Youngstown State, and she was single. I was getting there, but I wasn't yet. So I didn't know what to do. I was stuck between like a deer and caught in headlights. Like, I know biblically what I should be doing. Well, to back up before that point, I used to write God letters when I would get upset. I kind of was confirmed by Rob Skiba the other night when he said, how many of you looked at my Facebook? Well, sorry. That's how those letters went. And I realized that free will, people can do whatever they want. People have the choice to make it or break it. So, in this case, I started talking to her a couple times. She came up to see me with a couple of her friends the next week, and I said, I asked one of her friends, I go, so do you think she'd go out with me? And they're like, yeah. It's only because I was doing cartwheels across the front of the building, which is another story. But we would end up making plans to go on a date. Well, that day, I told her I had to go to court. She thought it was a moving violation or something like that. I neglected to tell her it was my divorce. And I was sitting in the courtroom, and I looked at my ex-wife and said, we can fix this. This can change. We can, I love you still. And she just looks at her attorney and my attorney and goes, give me the papers. And so my attorney looked at me and said, so what are you doing today? Like thinking, I'm gonna go in my basement, I'm gonna cry. I go, I got a date. And she was standing right there and just looked at me and I said, I'm out, I did what I could. You didn't want it. So about 5 minutes later, after our first date, we get married. Okay, it was like 7-8 months. But it's still, we got married. And I knew from the moment that I met her that this was, the one I married before was just infatuation. It wasn't real love. I was a means to an end for her to get out of her house, and I just wanted to be married. I wanted the status. I don't know what I was thinking, but I knew the moment that I met her that she was the one for me. And she will tell you that I wrote a song on my way home from our first date, and it basically talks about that. And she goes, I hate when guys say, what was it?
That they like me, but they don't even know me.
Yeah, that they like her. They don't even know her. And I said, and so I put that in the song. And, and it's like, but you don't know me. And I have a higher power that works with me and shows me things. And so we ended up falling in love. Our road has not been easy. I don't even know where I'm at in my notes. I would read you guys some of the letters, but my mom who has passed away would blush. So I'm not going to do that. And I wasn't trying to.
That's the whole reason why.
I understand. But you'll understand why. When we got married, we ended up living with my parents. Yeah. Funny how the parents come back into the picture when you're broke. Former road manager, record label who just lost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you no longer have any money. And my parents were cool about it for the first 3 weeks. And the most important part of my journey at that point was my kid. She was my light. She was my everything. So my now wife had to know that that little kid right there was the most important part of my life. We would be married. About 3 years later, my daughter would be diagnosed with brain cancer. And during that time, that 3 years, I couldn't hold a job. I couldn't do anything pretty much right. And she was the main breadwinner for our family. And we ended up moving in with my parents, moving out, moving in, moving out. So 3 years later, we had a boy named Ian. And he was about a year and a half, 9 months, that's it. 9 months into his life, his sister would be diagnosed with brain cancer. And we would end up I had a job at that point, and when she was diagnosed with brain cancer, she was rushed in for emergency surgery, and they found a navel-sized orange tumor in the back of her head. They got it all out, and they ended up, they told us that she could be a vegetable the rest of her life, or she might come out of a coma. She was in a coma for a very long time. And every night, I would, I would just repetitively pray over my daughter. Psalms 80, verse 7. Restore us, O God of hosts. Let your face shine that we may, I forgot my glasses, that we may be saved. I just wanted restoration. My little girl was a bright, smart, beautiful kid who was now laying in the bed, not able to move her left side, or it was either left or right side, I can't remember. And she wasn't talking, and she wasn't waking up. Almost a month in, we were in the ICU. One night, I'm praying, and I'm like, God, I'm tired. I'm going home 1 day a week to go shower and eat normal food and then be right back at the hospital. I need you to do something. And a nurse walked in about 3 o'clock in the morning, and she said I had to give her a pain medication. And so they would give it to her orally, and she would take it. Well, that night, we're like, Skylar, wake up. Take your medicine. Take your medicine. She goes, I don't want my medicine. And we're like, she just talked. And then she tried to kick me with the side that she was not moving. And here come the car wheels again. You know, I'm in the ICU at 3 o'clock in the morning doing car wheels. Like, God, you are restoring her. We were in the hospital from September to about the week or two before Thanksgiving, I believe. And she had to learn how to walk, talk, breathe, everything, all over again like she was an infant. And I knew God was going to restore her. It was just, there was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And so later on, we're living life as a family. You know, we have a kid who has special needs, but she's doing great. She's walking, might look like a penguin at times, but nonetheless, she's back to being Skylar. And during that time was a restoration in our own lives. We moved to another city called Cuyahoga Falls. I'm working in a cell phone store. I then leave there to open up my own chain of cell phone stores. And then, we bought a house. We had cars that worked. And, well, that was always a problem in our lives, cars that didn't work. So, one day, we go to the doctors again. It's about 3 years later, 3.5 years later, she was in remission. And the only reason why she went into remission is because they gave her radiation that, one, she could not have any more radiation because your body can only take so much radiation before it'll kill you. And the chemo actually was killing her blood. So they had to stop the chemo. And so they forced her into remission. And about 3 years later, we were going for our last MRI. And because we had to go every 3 months for MRIs. And at the end, they say, we're going to now do it once a year. So we were in we were at the doctor's. I remember the day, it was October 10th, October 10th, 2010. And we were wondering why the MRI was taking so long, because it was, normally in for about an hour and done. Well, we were there for about 2 hours, and my ex-wife and I and her were just like, this is crazy, what's taking so long? Doctors pulled us into an office and explained that back in the last MRI, they found something. They thought it was radiation necrosis, so therefore it kind of grew, but they're not worried about it, so we're going to give you until December. And so it was actually New Year's Day or the day after New Year's that they brought us back in, they did another MRI, and they said that it grew again. And so they did a biopsy. Doctor said, it just looks like scar tissue, you should be fine. We were in the hospital. I'm thinking we're going to be there for 2 more months because they had to open up her skull again, and take something from her brain. Well, we were in there for 7 days, and it ended up being something that I remember it to this day. I'm playing with my daughter, jumping on her bed in the hospital, and the nurse practitioner walks in and said, it's not good. She's got stage 4, stage 3, astrocytoma glioma. And I go, okay, well, what can we do? There's no cure. 0 chance of life to be lived. So we're like, okay, well, we don't believe that, but we'll see what happens. Doctor, a few days later, would have us come in, and he would tell us that she's got about 12 to 18 months to live. Our lives changed. So during that time, I had to make a decision if I was going to man up or not. Because up until this point, I was still, didn't have a GED, didn't have anything. I had a business, but it really didn't mean anything. And when push came to shove, they said to me, she's going to need care pretty much around the clock. So I closed all my business, all my cell phone stores, liquidated it. We then became months away from losing our house. Sheriff's coming to padlock our doors, and I'm sitting here taking care of a kid who, at that time, was our, I had 2 boys at that time. She was expecting another one, and Skylar would end up being taken. And the one thing she asked me is, Daddy, can you take care of me? I don't want to go into hospice. I want to live at Grandma's house, and I want you to take care of me. How do you say no? So I dropped everything. And I said, okay, whatever you want. Not realizing the ramifications it would have on my family. But if I believe God, and I believe the written word, He'll restore what has been taken. And through that, we ended up losing our house, losing our business, and we were just about a month away from the sheriffs coming to padlock our house. We found somebody that would rent our house, or rent to us. But what had happened was, November 2nd, 2011, we went and got her checked out because she was pregnant, but the government makes you take blood test or P test or whatever it was to prove that you're pregnant. And before we left, I kissed her on the forehead, gave her morphine, and said, I'll be back. Mind you, the night before she died, or a couple days before she passed, she fell into a coma. But she was there because I would ask her questions and she'd smile or she would frown. And we were only gone for what, half hour. Come back to my mom's house, and I noticed foam coming out of her mouth. And so my mom was sleeping on my bed, which was a couch, next to her bed, and I come running in, obviously screaming, and I grabbed the suction, and I realized that I'm going further back than she'd ever let me before. I pulled it out, and she took her last 2 final breaths.
Bless you, brother. Take a breath. Bless you, brother.
I've had a lot of people die in my life. I've witnessed death. Hers was, I think, really angelic. There's no other term for it because when I laid her back down, her head back down on the pillow, and there was light shining on her head. And I knew. So, with that, I don't know, people must have thought we were a Latino family because everybody came over. And everybody wanted to be with us, and her body was still there, and I've never experienced that. And my dad looked at me and said, I can't be you. I could never do what you did. I would have ran. I would have hid. You're a better man than I ever was. So, one of my daughter's final wishes was that she asked me one day when she was sick, Dad, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I said, oh, honey, I'm 13 years old. I mean, I am grown. She goes, no, what do you want to do? I said, well, I always wanted to be a police officer. And I said, but you need high school diploma or a GED. And she goes, promise me you'll get your GED. And so I promised her. A couple months after her death, I went and I signed up for GED classes. I mean, how hard could the GED be after experiencing having to carry your own daughter's body out of a house?
Right.
And I'm like, I said to my wife, I don't know if I can do this. I mean, I hadn't stepped in foot in school in 24 years at that point. Well, God obviously knew that I could handle it. I ended up getting my GED within 6 months. And from that, I got I went into the police academy, being old and fat. I almost had what we all thought was a heart attack. It ended up being my gallbladder. That's an old guy thing, your gallbladder. But we wouldn't know that it was my gallbladder until a few years later when I actually had an attack and I'm like, I'm dying. But overthinking kills your happiness. And from getting my GED, getting kind of kicked out of the police academy because they didn't want me to die and have to pay my wife a lot of money.
Right.
I signed up at Kent State, which is one of the most liberal colleges in the world. And I would get my degree in applied conflict management, which is a mediation and negotiation degree, which is a nice term to say a protest degree. It makes no sense. So out of that, I'm like, I actually got good grades. I had a 3.7 GPA. I, like in school, so I would like for punishment. I would sign up to take my master's. I got my master's in 2019 in criminal justice, which was a study, it's a master of science, because I am studying deviant behavior, be a profiler. And one of that scripture kept coming back to me. Psalms 87, about restoration. And when I look back, God's sense of humor is crazy, because when my daughter was dying, I read, it was Matthew, I believe, 26, and it's when Jesus was in the garden the night before he was to be led away, or the night that he was going to be led away, and he was saying, God, take this cup from me. Take this. I don't want this. If you can have somebody else, please. I'm paraphrasing, so don't get mad at me. I don't have my glasses on. I would have read it word for word, but I was like that. Let me trade places with my kid. She has a long life to live. She's 12 years old. What I didn't tell you is that in the doctor's office, when we found out that there was a tumor, I audibly heard God say, I saved her once. I'm not going to do it again. And we got into the car and I said, she's not going to live through this. This was before we ever got any kind of news. And she goes, well, what do you mean? I said, well, God told me to basically to prepare for her death. And then I realized God had to do the same thing for us. And all I can say is that the restoration, I lost everything, lost my kid, lost my house. By all accounts, we should be done. They say 75% of all people that lose a child, they get divorced. And if I didn't have her, I probably would have killed myself. Just to be honest. But the reality is God told me you have 3 more kids. You can't leave. You can't walk away. You can't kill yourself. The angry letters to God won't be spoken. Because God showed me through a different way that He prepared me from birth to that moment and went through what I went through to be able to handle it. And I wish I gave it to somebody else because it just wasn't what I wanted. But I'm glad I went through it. I'm going to play it's a short video, but a long video. It's like 7 minutes long. But I appreciate it if you guys watch the video of our family.
Life, love, forgiveness, acceptance. Stripping demons right off my back, trying to leech life off of me. Get off of me and feel my father's fury, oppressor. One day you'll feel the full blast of his vengeance, bells above, but for now I'll love, 'cause I got strength. He blew courage in my backbone. Now I'll stand straight and militant, lining up in Jehovah's battalion, knowing you can't challenge him, so we march forward. Swift as eagles, set like talons, ready to grip souls from your grass. Slick snake in the grass, my lord, sees you and vengeance is his. But for now I retaliate, propelled by a holy mandate to heal, 'cause I know how bad it hurts. Full of madness at first, but now gladness bursts out the seams of our beings, 'cause we overflow with the oil of joy, the ointment of the anointed, mending any torn soul, healing any broken bone. He is here. He was there. He is peace. Is faithful.
I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit in you and move you to follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws. You will live in the land I gave to your forefathers. You will be my people and I will be your God. Security, no doubt, no hesitation that will ever stop us. Because we are the sons of the living God. Because we are the children of the Almighty. Because we are the residents of the kingdom of heaven. And we are soldiers in an army of the immortal. And when we speak life, life happens. And when we speak healing, healing happens. And when we speak truth, truth happens. And when we go take what we have found to a dead world, we'll see it come to life again. And when we take what we have found to a hopeless world, we'll see hope come back. We'll see the heart of our world start beating again, and we'll see the color come back into people's faces. And absolutely nothing will ever stop that. And mountains will move before us, and oceans will part before us, and the dead will raise before us. And the world will know that our God is a God that heals, and our God is a God that lives, and our God is a God that loves them like anything anyone has ever felt before. Because we are fearless, because we are His hands, and because we are His feet forever and ever.
I'll leave you guys with this. If there's one thing that I learned through this whole thing, this whole experience in my life, is that what was ever stolen from you, whatever trauma you've been through, whatever things you thought you did to deserve whatever you got, it can all be restored. Your life, your love, your happiness, your life can be restored. And I just pray that if you're not finding your happiness, that you do. Because you have nothing else in your life but God and your happiness. And I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much.